You are listening to a Sustainable World Radio podcast. Sustainable World Radio brings you in-depth interviews, news, and commentary about exciting, creative, and innovative ways of living. Produced in Santa Barbara, California, Sustainable World focuses on positive solutions to environmental challenges, solutions that adhere to the permaculture ethics, earth care, people care, fair share. Are you interested in learning more about permaculture projects around the globe, how to plant a food forest, restorative design, or ethnobotany? Then stay tuned to Sustainable World Radio. I'm Jill Cloutier. My guest today is Rebecca Burgess, educator, author, and textile artist. So welcome to Sustainable World, Rebecca.
Thank you.
And I would love to hear, what is the Fibershed Project? Tell us about your new work that you're doing.
This project started with a personal challenge that I began pretty much this June is when June of 2010 is when I started formulating the foundation for this one-year challenge to live in clothes whose fibers and dye plants would all be sourced within 150 miles of my front door. And I started, stepping into these garments throughout the summer and primarily was wearing them only, underwear included and the whole gamut of what you would need to exist. Pretty much got off the ground and running by late summer, and I'm officially in this challenge absolutely now, in this September 2010.
So why do you want to live for 1 year in clothes made out of fibers sourced within 150 miles, and I think that's 241 kilometers, from your front door? What motivated you to do this?
What motivated me primarily was several visits to different textile communities, starting with my trip to Southeast Asia when I was just going through city centers where the waterways were black, and I was always curious as to why the freshwater resources in a lot of these textile towns were so contaminated and polluted, and I seemed to not see anyone who was living over the age of 50. They were young towns, everyone seemed sick. There were lines outside the clinics, the medical clinics. I thought, what's going on here? And at first I thought it was maybe the agrochemicals that were being used in the fields for cotton. I couldn't really pinpoint what it was until I finally kind of walked across this one little bridge one day and came to a manufacturing site where they were doing a lot of synthetic dye work, and the effluent was pouring out into the waterway, and it was pouring bluish black, and I suppose they were dyeing, denim or something attempting blue, and I just couldn't believe what I was observing, smelling, feeling. And in doing research beyond my own anecdotal evidence, I realized that according to one of these articles I read recently in Eco Textiles, in an entry from even 2007, it was said that our use of synthetic dyes is the number one polluter of freshwater resources on the planet. Synthetic dye use has the biggest carbon footprint of all the aspects of manufacturing and textiles. And so the Fibershed Project really was inspired by, natural color. I really wanted to focus in on what dye plants I could grow. And then I thought about, a lot of things don't even need to be dyed. And I started to fall in love with the fibers that were provided in my local community. And it was like, there's a woman growing color-grown cotton. She grows rose and sage and tan brown cottons. You don't even need to dye them. The wool ranchers, the people who are really breeding for fiber, they're breeding many of their sheep to grow cinnamon-colored wool or dark charcoals and tans and browns, and you don't, again, really need to dye those fibers. So, and typically there's a lot of pollution and abuse going on, even beyond the dye manufacturing processes. There's, I could go into all the details of fiber, but just based on dyes alone was enough for me to jump into the project.
And that is really sad. When we talked the other day, I felt really bummed because to me, I love clothes and I love color. Color is what really excites me about clothes, and one of my favorite clothes colors is blue. And if you could tell, I went into mourning after our talk. It was like, oh no. But if you could tell our listeners what's going on, and then we'll get more into your project. But I think we were talking a bit about, I think, synthetic blue dye and what is actually in that dye.
I think it's the fiber reactive dyes that I was picking up and reading about in this article and video entry that was done recently in the last 6 months by CNN on blue dye that is being used to dye our denim. And typically to get that color, because it's not, even at the time before we had the synthetic production of pigment, getting blue from nature is not easy. So you can imagine when scientists and chemists try to synthesize that color, it's also very difficult. And it requires a combination generally of copper, chrome, cobalt, heavy metals that generally should never be used in high concentrations in any substance, but happen to generally be used in very high concentrations for blue. A lot of people are using synthetic indigo and calling it, indigo dyed. And the process for using synthetic indigo, for instance, synthetic indigo still has those heavy metals, and it also tends to have the use of thuria dioxide, and there's a lot of ammonia gas production in the use of indigo. Even if they say they're using natural blue, it tends not to be. For whatever reason it is, nature has provided us many, many colors, but blue is just not one of those that is easily come by.
I know. I was so sad. And, I've been buying organic food and trying to buy more local food for years and years and years. And after we talked, I realized that I am actually buying all this great food, but then I'm wearing material that is probably filled with chemicals. So it was an interesting thing to realize. And I think it's harder and harder, and I don't know if you found this, to actually find material that isn't synthetic. Because jeans, now I'm realizing when I was shopping for jeans recently that half of them, or more than half, were half polyester and half cotton, which is a new trend. And I've been trying to buy biodegradable materials for a long time, but this is kind of really, I think what you're doing is unraveling the hidden cost of the textile industry, which most people don't really think about.
I can imagine that it's just something that we're up to our armpits and heads with food. Food is just something that since 1986, when Carlo Petrini started, thinking about a response to McDonald's going into downtown Rome, and he started the slow food movement in response to fast food. And that's taken 25 years for us to really grab hold of, and it was an organic progression, and I feel that with clothing, the unraveling process is just beginning. And unfortunately, and I guess this happened in the slow food movement as well, I observe a lot of people taking the message of green textiles or eco-friendly clothing and unfortunately utilizing a term without really backing up that term with really good practices. And so I guess you call that greenwashing, but it feels like there tends to be a lot of that in the industry, like with the idea of bamboo being a good eco-friendly product, or organic fiber production being turned into beautiful garments and then dyed synthetically and still being called an ecologically sustainable choice. I don't understand that at all. That's just like a conundrum to me that you would take an organic T-shirt and then synthetically dye it and call that eco-friendly.
Which is happening, yes, because bamboo, I bought a bamboo sweater. I was so excited. It's bright purple. And then my friend said, I'm not sure how eco-friendly that is. And I feel like I'm pretty up on issues, but I kind of had a feeling the dyes weren't great, but I didn't want to acknowledge it because, as I was saying, I love color. And, this is like blue washing, green washing, red washing. This is a totally huge field here. Can you tell us a bit, Rebecca,
about some of these fabrics that some of them I think we kind of know, a lot of us know that they may not be that good for us, like maybe polyester, virgin. Have you seen virgin acrylic sweaters anywhere? I ran into those at the store recently.
No,
I thought, can acrylic be virgin? It's like, But what about rayon? Now, rayon I've heard is from a tree. How bad can it be?
Oh, well, it is, a cellulose fiber. It's based in plants and tree, and I suppose it's from, I think it comes from a myriad of different substances that are plant-based. But to soften those, especially if you're thinking about the inner bark of a tree or the fibrous elements of a tree, they're tough. And so what ends up happening with rayon is that it's chemically processed to soften. There's softening agents that there's a gamut of softening agents, and supposedly those tend to be some of the more toxic elements in the system. We have, fire retardants have been labeled for sure as highly, highly toxic, but very few people talk about the applications that the fiber undergoes before it's woven. And those softening agents get hidden in the cost of textiles because we don't see them, and they're so in the chain, deep in the chain, and that chain tends to live in other countries that the effluent from that process and the chemical processing to get those chemicals in existence, none of that's happening on shore. But softening agents break down fibers. So the chemical components to break a tree fiber into something soft and pliable and stretchy, you're taking a substance that's not supposed to do that and you're making it do that. The idea of something that, a piece of bamboo or a tree or a color even, that you don't see in nature, or that you see in nature but it has a certain purpose, but then you see it transformed into something completely different. There's steps and stages along the way that are probably not so friendly.
Mm-hmm. I guess, especially to make the inner bark of a tree soft, I guess it would it would take a lot. Oh my goodness.
That it does.
Rebecca, do you have an opinion on polyester? And I know a lot of our sports clothes that we buy are polyester, recycled polyester from soda bottles.
Well, I think that we are, doing something wonderful when we recycle a plastic bottle into fleece, or we recycle it into yoga pants or something that moves and stretches like plastic can do. The issue that I have with plastics, even though that I think we're going to be using them for a long time to come because they don't break down and we do need to do something with them. The issue from a personal health standpoint has been pointed out by this wonderful doctor and colleague of mine, Dr. Sarah Gottfried, who works in integrative medicine, and she's primarily focused on endocrine disruptors and the effects of plastics on our body. And she has been looking at, and no studies have actually been done on the absorption of endocrine disruptors into our systems through our clothes. We don't actually know. But the idea that the skin is the biggest organ on the body and that it's porous, that to wear plastics on the body while sweating, it's similar to how you wouldn't want to put your plastic bottle filled with water in the sun and then drink it. You wouldn't want to heat up your body and create a chemical reaction between the plastics you're wearing and the water on your skin and the heat that's generated by your body. There's definitely a chemical transaction occurring. To what level, we don't know. But there are people that I am aware of that have chemical sensitivities to the level where they cannot wear polyester and they cannot wear synthetically dyed clothes. They go into strong reactions. So we know that some people are affected. We don't know because of the, we call it she calls it bioaccumulation. You don't know the effect until kind of you've got to a tipping point. So many of us are assuming things are okay with wearing polyesters and synthetically dyed clothes, but we really don't know that it's okay.
Have there been studies done, Rebecca, on if these chemicals and the heavy metals that you were talking about in the dyes, do they remain in the clothing?
We don't know how long into the life cycle of a garment these heavy metals are in the clothes. We do know that unfixed dye remains on garments before they come to us, especially the cheaper, faster clothes that you'll find, for ridiculously low prices. The process of really doing dye work well, there's a very high cost, even with synthetic dyes. There's a process of, just on an environmental level, treating your effluent water, recycling water. Most of the time when you're looking at a cheaply produced garment, they are using someone in the supply chain that they don't even really know what their operating standards are, and they're doing it as cheaply as possible. So dye work done cheaply tends to have unfixed dye, meaning dye that did not bond to the fiber, and it remains in the clothes, and it remains unfixed, meaning that it can bond to your skin, meaning that it can bond to the water in your home if you wash it. If you have a gray water system, for instance, that stuff will go into your system.
So it not only is affecting the water from the factory where it was made, it can affect your own water supply in your town as well.
Completely.
That explains those pants I got at Ross that dyed my legs.
Yeah.
It wasn't good.
Oh, no.
But luckily it washed off.
I'm sorry to hear that.
What about, so you're saying that, so these fabrics like rayon and bamboo, supposedly natural, still need to be treated. What about cotton? Can you tell us a bit about your ideas on cotton?
Well, from the ground up, my ideas would be are generated from farmers that I've spoken with. And so if I think about cotton in terms of a fiber, it likes to grow in dry, hot climates that also have seasonal water supplies. So if you think about those needs, like where are the dry, hot areas that also have water? Those tend to be places where there are dams and that irrigation can happen via some kind of channelization of water. And you'll see this happening all over the Central Valley in California. You'll see it down in Arizona with the Colorado River being dammed and then being used to irrigate cotton. It loves water, but it also loves dry and hot. So think of the Nile Valley. Think of where cotton originated. It could handle dry and hot, but it could also handle living in floodplains or areas that water could be channeled to feed it. So environmentally speaking, it's a tricky plant to work with on scale. The kind of scale that we are consuming cotton at, I don't think, like Yvonne Chenard, who runs Patagonia, said, we'll never have enough organic cotton for the world. It's just not possible. It's not sustainable. So fundamentally, just from an environmental perspective, we cannot, due to water resources and climate realities, organic cotton production isn't going to clothe the world on its own, which is fine. So then you move up the chain past just the requirements that plant needs to exist, and then you look at what we're often doing to secure that plant's longevity in the field without being damaged by boll weevils, without being damaged by other pests. We, American farmers, use a quarter of the world, we don't say American farmers, but internationally a quarter of the world's pesticides are used on cotton, which is definitely disproportionate to how much cotton is grown compared to other crops. And in China, they use 6 times the amount of pesticides on their cotton as American farmers use on our cotton because of lack of education, maybe due to the thought that more is better. So, and most of our cotton now, cotton growing is happening overseas. We still have a lot of cotton being grown in the U.S., most of it not organic. And it tends to be, of all the fibers grown, by far the most pesticide sprayed and the most insecticide sprayed and herbicide sprayed plant. And so unfortunately, for those reasons, environmentally speaking, it's a hard choice. And then there's the organic cotton producers, and there are many of them out there. I'm working with one, and even though she's producing organically, she still, says things like cotton should only be grown rotationally with, sugar beets, alfalfa. It should never be grown season after season in one plot of land. It should always be considered second to the needs of fish in the creeks. So cotton really, if grown appropriately, I love what Sally Fox says. It's not the fault of the cotton plant. She's the cotton farmer I'm working with. We shouldn't bastardize it and make it, and demonize this poor plant. It's how humans have expected, what their expectations of cotton are, and the way they've tried and forced and pushed this plant into an extreme situation. It's definitely not the plant's fault. And it doesn't mean we can't have sustainable cotton production. It just means we may not be consuming as much of it. It has to match like the real costs that we incur due to its commercial production aren't being considered. So what if we were looking at those? I think the scale would be brought into a more humane and environmentally sane direction, which would look like all of us wearing probably
a lot less clothes or a lot less cotton.
Both. I think we would have both. We would have high quality clothes that lasted the eons.
And we'd throw them on the compost pile when we were done with them. I'm sure all the nudists in the audience are cheering.
Oh.
I better
we
start
can
working
do
out
without
more.
them.
But so what will we be wearing? What about hemp? What do you think?
Oh, I love it. I think, as a fiber, it's not legal to grow it in North America or United States. Canada did legalize hemp in the 90s, and it's grown there. I think it's going to be one of the most amazing fiber crops if they would let people grow it. It would just be stunning to see what we could do with it, because it grows, as you know, it's a native plant to North America, and we pay the Food and Drug Administration gazillions of dollars yearly to spray and kill naturally occurring hemp, industrial-like hemp. Hemp meaning not the THC-laden marijuana, but really just hemp, fibrous hemp. And it's already growing. We just kill it every year. And so it would be really nice if people could acknowledge that the fact that it can grow like a weed, which is so nice because it won't need water, won't need pesticides. It likes the climate, and it can be milled into some of the most, I would say, the strongest, most high-quality garments.
Does it have to be treated as strongly as the other, as rayon and bamboo?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It's more like linen in that you need to ret it. You need to soften the fibers, which, in the days of old, before they had a lot of mechanization, they would rot the fibers in pools of water. They'd put the stalk in, and they would rot it until it had softened, and then they would strip away the husk and peel the fibers out, and then they would ret them. They would kind of drag them across a bed of nails and soften them that way. There are lots of, simple ways that people did it in the past, and of course we would mechanize that now. But no, it wouldn't need chemical softening agents.
So you're going to be wearing clothes that are made 150 miles within your home. Will you tell us a bit about your wardrobe? And I'm wondering if you'll be including things like silk and leather and maybe wool, cashmere. What type of clothes are you going to be wearing?
Well, right now, for the summer, I primarily worked with cottons. I didn't wear a lot of wool this summer. So that I have to say, I am cotton dependent when it gets hot. And we worked with Sally Fox's cotton. She lives 90 miles from here. Some of her cotton I had to, break my hard and fast rule of 150 miles due to some of the milling of her cotton. Because when NAFTA and the FTA agreements were signed, all of our mills were moved to Mexico, China, Southeast Asia, and as a whole. And so some of her cotton has had to be milled at research mills because we don't have any working mills left for her scale, which is small. Yeah, so just to have a small farmer growing cotton, wanting to mill their crop, can't do it. So to have these things milled, I was so committed to her story because she's such a this is going beyond the tenet of our conversation here, but she has a very powerful story. So I really wanted to include her cotton, and thus I said, well, it's going to get milled outside of the fiber shed, and that's just, a part of this narrative we have of how America is no longer doing things for itself, and that's an important narrative to have on the table right now as we move into economic structures that aren't serving us. So summer was filled with this cotton that I wore a lot of it, and it's been lovely. I'm wearing it right now. I'm wearing her buffalo brown seed variety that I did not have to dye, and I dipped some of it in my homegrown indigo though, just for the heck of it, and it's really layering with that buffalo brown, layering deep blue on top of exquisite.
So indigo, the actual plant indigo, is where you get the dye.
I do grow. Well, it's actually, I grow Polygonum tinctorium. Indigofera tinctoria is technically indigo, but that Indigofera tinctoria is grown in Indonesia. It's grown in Mexico and Central America. It's not a species I could grow in a non-tropical environment, but I can grow Polygonum tinctorium, which is Japanese indigo. But I'll get back to fiber. Sorry about that. So as I move into the fall, we're going to be working with a lot more wool. Marty's starting to have things made with some wool that was considered byproduct wool. I've had a lot of wool milled that was going to get thrown away because in my county alone we're throwing away around 25,000 pounds of wool a year, and that's part of my message with this project is we have, I put this on the homepage of the blog, the Fibershed blog. We have a 14% unemployment rate, and we are importing wool from New Zealand, having it manufactured in China, and we're buying it at department stores, and yet we're throwing it away in our own counties. I don't get it. No, it's just the mismanagement of resources is the cornerstone of why we're not functioning as societies on this planet. We're throwing away what we could use, and we are spending money on things that are in many cases hurting us or the environment as a whole, which is the same thing, us, the environment, same conversation. So I was really taken with this idea of using wool that we're throwing away and making garments out of it, and I have a couple of designers who've pulled out some really beautiful pieces out of wool that I had milled at our local mill. The mill owner said it was great to work with. There's this whole stigma around wool that comes from sheep that are harvested for meat, that it won't be as good, it won't function as a garment, you don't really have much you can do with it. And in many cases, I guess that could be true, but as far as my experience so far, I've been able to use all of the wool that I've come across that was on its way to a compost pile or the landfill.
It's great. So you can actually, you're using the wool that's locally produced that would have ended up in the landfill. So for winter, the wool's going to be great. What other materials are you going to be using?
Cashmere, and cashmere is from goats, and it's there's a ranch about just 150 miles from here in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, and they actually have their own mill. They raise goats, and they are milling their own cashmere fiber into yarn, so I can have all of the things that I'm working with are pretty much, I can have things milled up into the yarn phase. California and this region used to have working mills, where you could have fabrics woven, which would make the job for all of us a lot easier. But that's not the case. So I'm working with raw fibers in many cases and having them felted. Felting is a process where you can just aggravate the fibers and bond them to one another, and so you don't have to go through a knitting process or a weaving process with them. So some of the things, I'm going to have a felted dress, a felted poncho. That's coming this week from a designer who's really good at making felt thin enough so that it has a drape so you can wear it. The cashmere will likely be hand knit into undergarments. Cashmere is really great against the skin, as we all know. And the other fiber that I'm going to be blending, that I've blended already, that I just got back yesterday, was alpaca. Alpaca is being raised at Renaissance Ridge, also in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. And I'm working with a rancher there who has, black and caramel and white and cream, and these beautiful colors are coming from her alpaca, and a very fine micron width, meaning most of her herd averages around, I think, 17 to 20 microns, which means it's a very high quality fiber, and it's right here in my fiber shed.
And it all sounds so luxurious and wonderful to wear.
It actually is ridiculous. Sometimes I have had to say to myself, this project is turning out in my favor. I really thought that I was going to be struggling here, and I've certainly had my moments, if not many, where I've been cold or just kind of a sense of unknown, how am I going to clothe myself? A modern person's questions around clothing themselves. You have a day job. You have so much time to really commit to, sitting and sewing, sitting and weaving. These are slow processes, and because we have sent all of our mechanization overseas, I'm committed to doing this. I'm also thus have to be committed to doing things by hand very slowly. So there's been times when I was like, am I going to make it? Am I going to have enough garments to stay warm?
It gets cold where you are.
It's crossed my mind. It does, yeah. Well, north of San Francisco, we can have very chilly evenings and mornings, even in the summer, and then the fog comes in. Yeah, it can be pretty cold.
What about undergarments? You mentioned a bit that you're going to have, was it the alpaca for the undergarments or the cashmere?
I think I'm going to do both, but we're going to start with cashmere as an undergarment. There's a really talented knitter who has made the shirt that I'm currently wearing. She hand knit some of Sally Fox's boucle cottons, and she is also knitting a merino wool bathing suit, and she's pretty much just finishing the shorts on the suit now. I hand spun the wool for her, and so then she's going to step into a new project. I believe she really wanted to start working with the cashmere. So undergarments are something we want to explore for the winter. We want to start, shedding light on this idea of outdoor gear. I'm a very active person. I like to be on my bike, or I like to be swimming. I like to be hiking. I'm going to be cross-country skiing this year in Fibershed garments. And the question is, can we use natural fibers without synthetic processing agents, without plastics, and still can I stay warm and protected from the elements in these conditions, in snow, in exposure to rain? What will that look like? So that's really, I think, one of the big questions that a lot of the designers I'm working with have is, can we show that you don't need polypropylene? Can we show that you don't need rayon? Can we show that you don't need recycled fleece, recycled plastic bottle fleece? Not that these things are all bad. I don't want to demonize the work of a lot of these outdoor equipment clothing companies, because actually I think they have some of the best environmental ethic of all companies out there. Patagonia especially, I really admire their work. But then I just have these questions around, well, I know the whole world can't live in maybe my wardrobe, for sure. I think my project is a part of a multifaceted solution, but I am curious about just the durability of natural fibers in the elements, and what will that look like? So I'm really excited to see how cashmere will be on the body. I've been experimenting a little bit with the cashmere I have, just the yarns, knitting swatches and keeping it close to the skin, and realizing, my gosh, this is incredible. It's so soft and it's so insulating.
And that brings me to one of my questions, which is kind of on an intimate matter, but I think I was talking to you before about realizing you go bra shopping and it's nylon bras stuffed with foam, like this big, I don't know if it's what is the foam? Some thick foam, and then these metal, encased in metal. And it's just, how healthy can that be? I think the cashmere sounds a lot better.
I don't think there's anything healthy about that. And I'm just, one of those people for underwear, for bras that my frame, I'm not large chested, so that I have a pretty average female frame. 30, what is mine? If I did buy a bra, I haven't bought a bra in so long, this is kind of embarrassing, but I think it would be like a 34B or C, which I guess is, I don't know, I suppose that's average. So a lot of what I'm wearing to support my frame is really just tank tops that are created in the summer. They're made of cotton, and they're just real form-fitting. They're kind of snug over the head, and when I put them on, they hug the chest, and that's good enough. I don't bother with wire nor foam.
Yeah, the foam thing. I don't quite get the foam thing. Like, where did that come from? We have leftover stuffing from mattresses. I don't know what is the deal, but that's in all the bras now. It's very strange. It's very strange. So someone listening to this might think, oh, I really want to go buy some hemp clothes or some linen, flax, some of these natural materials. And then you go to the store and they can be $80 for one shirt. Do you know why the cost is very prohibitive of natural materials and fabrics at this time?
It's a really good question. And I think two responses. One is, those prices are reflecting true costs, unfortunately. Those are costs reflective of the work it takes to process a fiber to get it from point A to point Z. But yet that's probably not the cost. It would probably come down, actually probably drastically, if we put our time, focus, and attention towards manufacturing natural fibers for mainstream sale. So what happens is that linen and flax and hemp are, well, linen is flax, sorry. If you just look at linen and hemp, that those fibers are considered high-end. We really don't, there isn't a lot of, for instance, even in California, there's no flax grown at all. It's for fiber production. It's just, we have no way of manufacturing it, so we just don't even grow it. And my question really is, what if we focused on natural fibers more? I think really that design and textiles has been focusing so much on the excitement provided with innovative new blends. What happens if we can mix this plastic with this stretch factor? Let's get the clothes as stretchy as possible. Let's get them as, all these crazy things that will allow it to move and function this way. And it's a marketing point, we could sell it because it does this and this, and how exciting. And I think people are so captivated by the newest and the best. It wicks, it stretches, it breathes. Most of the time it doesn't if it's synthetic. And I think that captivation has just taken the industry down a road that has brought so many people down that road. Our attention, our energy, and our focus is there. And I think if you swung the pendulum and you put the focus and attention back on natural fibers and remain committed to those and remain committed to innovating technologies that could process them more quickly, that could process them more efficiently without the use of synthetic softeners, I think we would see the costs come down.
And I do wonder if we will see the cost come down possibly as oil gets more expensive and all this cheap polyester clothing. I wonder if the cost of that will go up.
That's a really good point. I would think so. And I guess all of the costs associated with these synthetics, really, we're subsidizing. It's such a good point to think about oil. Oil right now is something that the American government is subsidizing so heavily that we don't know what our real costs would be without oil imbued in it's in our material culture everywhere we look. So what would the cost of anything be if we weren't subsidizing oil? Interesting.
If someone wants more information on your project, and maybe I think you have a blog, you're going to do a video, can you give your contact information for people and where they can find you online?
Our blog is http:// it's no www and it's fibershed.wordpress.com. fibershed.com. And that right now is our journal of the process. And we're soon to have a website up that's just focused on Fibershed. But the blog is the way to kind of engage with the stories that have been generated by this community of people who's committed to at least showing the world that it's possible. And it's a journal of experimentation. And I didn't answer your question about leather, but yes, there's a story about brain tanning on there, and we are going to incorporate locally sourced skins that are tanned locally with Native American tanning techniques. And we're also we aren't going to include silk yet, although a lot of designers and farmers in the region think that a local silk industry would be wonderful here. So it's bringing up a lot of the Fibershed blog, the stories and everything. It's pretty new. There's not a lot on there yet.
Beautiful pictures.
Paige Green. She's a masterful natural light photographer who works in food, a slow food movement. She works with artists and farmers. That's what she's committed to doing. So she's using her photography as such a way to catalyze this movement. I'm so grateful for her work.
I'm sure everyone's grateful for yours, because I could see how this is a template for people to know that, yes, they can wear fiber locally sourced, and maybe you will be the model that other communities can follow.
We hope so. One of our goals is to not let the year slip away in terms of documentation, and that's why I'm not just sitting in these clothes in my living room or at my job just going, this is really exciting. Like, for me, I'm personally feeling great, or, worried or scared, or whatever range of emotions I go through trying to do this. But I'm trying to share that with everybody so it's replicable and maybe inspiring, or maybe just the stories of lack even, like, hey, we don't have a cotton mill. This is awful. What's happening? Why can't our small farmers grow cotton and have it milled? Maybe that would inspire a new business model. Or, yeah, we have all these mulberry trees. We could feed silkworms like crazy. Why aren't we producing our own silk? Business model. Or there's no naturally produced color in this country. Dye farm. Like, I just hope, my prayer is that people just see this as a way to give people real jobs again, and to clothe us in a way that's non-toxic, and that we don't just keep offshoring misery to people who are trying to keep up with our consumption that, honestly, every American knows at this point that no American can keep up with the consumption we've been a part of for the last, 50, 100, 200, however you want to measure it. It's over.
Darn it. No, I'm kidding.
Well, in some ways, it's a transition. But I was hoping the project would inspire people to see that the transition could be beautiful, that the transition could be exciting, that it could open the door for innovation, but not even just like highly technologized or technologized or whatever that word is, innovation, but just going back to our roots, innovation.
Literally, with the plants.
Yes, growing them again.
If you could give our listeners some advice on what they could do to maybe minimize the negative effects of the textile industry, or something that they could do to maybe start buying local fabrics. I don't know what the steps would be. What do you think?
I think one of the steps that this project, it isn't speaking to as much, but it's one step that I like to put out there for people who are just in their day-to-day life kind of like, okay, what can I do? I'm kind of busy, is to just support the love of textiles by not throwing away your clothes, or maybe being a part of clothing swaps, not just constantly consuming, just maybe identifying ways where you could recycle the textiles through your community in a way where we're not wasting. That's That's one step to honor the bigger picture that we face. The second step would be if you are wanting to reskill yourself in terms of you want to learn what it takes to maybe make a garment. There are a lot of these do-it-yourself classes. Like I know in the North Bay, we're starting a reskilling training here out at the Regenerative Design Institute. And weavers, knitters, sewers, natural dyers, we're all coming together and we're building a school so people can come and learn what's required to make your own garments. And that's important for two reasons. I think if folks, listeners, want to get involved in reskilling themselves, it brings you into an awareness of the real costs of clothing, because once you make a garment, you realize how long it takes and how much the earth gives of herself to provide for one garment. You'll never look at clothes the same way, which is a good thing. And then the second thing is it's wonderful to have those skills to offer those into your community. You never know what latent, amazing talent one of us might have in the art of weaving or the art of dyeing. How many ethnobotanists would love to get into natural dye work? So reskilling yourself is like maybe the second step up into the process. And then I would say a third step, which is maybe only available to those with a little more time and money, because some of these things, like we don't want to avoid the whole good thing just because we want perfect. And I hear that from you, and I'm like, I love that, but yes, there's a cost to some of these local fibers. But if you're available and willing to go to a farmer's market and make purchases from a local fiber farmer, there are people popping up in farmers markets selling their organic, locally produced, locally milled yarns. We have, one woman in particular who's been out for a few years doing this, and I am suggesting everyone go buy yarns from her. And maybe if you can't knit them, there's a gazillion knitters out there. Go to a knitting store and ask for someone to make you a piece. And that's a maybe a little more expensive, but I think for many people it's still viable, and it would be an amazing thing. You could create your own Fibershed piece on your own.
That's so cool. And Rebecca, if you could just maybe tell us in a few sentences, what do you love most about the Fibershed Project and also your work with textile and dyeing, natural dyeing?
I love that question. This has been a lovely interview as a whole. What do I love about this project? I love that the art forms that tend to be so quiet and sometimes in our modern world solitary, in terms of me as a weaver, a natural dyer, I'm often not really in community when I'm doing those things. And they're ancient art forms, and they're meant to be done with groups of people, always. There were always guilds. There was always a group of men or women involved in the production of a garment, and you knew the faces and the personalities and just the whole community around the textile world would always be available back in ancient and the not-so-ancient times. We knew who was making our clothes in some form or another. And what I love about the project is that it's putting a face on the garments, and we're becoming a community. And that face could look like a sheep. It could look like a toyon native species that I use for dye. It could look like a knitter or one of our weavers, a human face. But it's just all of a sudden giving this incredible narrative. And it's a narrative that has a life. People are coming together in a way that is so beautiful. And so it's not only helping send a message out to how to sustainably clothe ourselves, it's also bringing human beings in my community together. And that's, I think, what I love the most.
And through the internet worldwide as well.
Oh, yes. I mean, we had beautiful comments come in from all over the world about this project.
Rebecca, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to talking with you in the future.
Oh, thank you for doing this interview. I deeply appreciate your commitment to this project and all of the projects that you communicate with the world about. It's wonderful.
You've been listening to a Sustainable World Radio podcast. For more information or to hear our other podcasts or interviews, visit www.sustainableworldradio.com. Sustainable World Radio is produced by Jill Cloutier. Music by Dana Lyons. Thanks for listening.